between India and Pakistan has highlighted the Kashmir conflict once again, but Kashmir is not the only issue that has gained attention since the war. Balochistan is a province in Pakistan which borders with Iran. Pakistan has claimed that India has contributed to terror attacks in Balochistan, and recently India has claimed that Balochistan has declared itself independent, reporting an Azad or free Balochistan, which is, of course, completely unfounded. Someone who has been advocating for Balochistan is Rida Aleem Khan. She's a Pakistani Australian Baloch. And she has a bachelor's of social work from Charles Sturt University and was the recipient of the 2018 Sir John Monash High Commendation Award for Youth Leadership. Rida is also a co-founder of the South Asian Women Network and Allies, a platform for South Asian women in Australia. And I'm Dr. Sabrina Hussain. I'm an Associate Professor of Sociology at the Centre for Peace and Security in Coventry. I'm also an Adjunct Professor of Politics and International Relations at Quaid-e-Azam University and a non-resident scholar at the Institute for Regional Studies in Islamabad. Rida, I met you some years ago when I was myself in Australia, and we've met subsequently since then. And I know that the issue of Balochistan is something that you've been speaking actively on. Do you just want to give us some background about how you got involved with that? And also perhaps just give us some context to what you consider the Balochistan issues are.
Thank you so much, Serena, for inviting me on this platform. I guess there are many reasons as to why I'm passionate about Baloch community's issues. Not only because the community from Balochistan has arrived in Australia since like 1860s, before the creation of Pakistan in 1947, and they survived this massive White Australia policy, World War I, World War II, and really invested and contributed into the making of Australia. But on the other hand, Baloch people have highly contributed to the making of Pakistan, to the making of Iran, even to an extent Afghanistan, because when we say Balochistan, it's a piece of land that's shared between three different countries, Afghanistan, Iran, and Pakistan. The part of Iran that we refer to as Balochistan is called Sistan Balochistan. So a big chunk of land, but it's also a tribe that is 10,000 years old, which means it is indigenous to Balochistan, and it has many different clans that sort of are indigenous to different parts of Pakistan. So today specifically, I'll be focusing on the Baloch people of Pakistan because they are the one who are primarily affected by this India-Pakistan conflict and constantly are being highlighted in media and whatnot. And I guess the story sort of starts really from the fact that from the very beginning of the creation of Pakistan, there was an element of Baloch community that was always part of Baloch separatist movement, and they were always part of the Baloch insurgency movement. However, that's just simply one clan. There are other clans of Balochistan that sort of extend all the way to the Indus River. So, for example, the clan of Baloch community that I come from, the Nutkani Tangwani clan of the Indus River, we have been indigenous to that community for more than 100 generations. And a lot of people don't understand the categorization of Baloch in Pakistan. So only 3% of people, 3% of people in Pakistan speak Balochi, but that does not mean that only 3% of Pakistan's population is Baloch. In fact, you could be a Saraiki speaking Baloch, you could be a Sindhi speaking Baloch, a Barhavi Baloch, you could be a Shiti Baloch. They came around Portuguese colonization to Pakistan, and they are of African descent, and they look African. And they have been again contributing to the making of Pakistan and to the society of Pakistan for a very long time. Unfortunately, though, the Baloch history and the Balochistan's history is not really taught. And when you don't teach about something, or when you don't educate people about something, people are due to fall for misinformation and disinformation, and sadly, even I would say to an extent, myths that simply are just false about the Baloch community. So here I am trying to hopefully debunk some of these myths about the Baloch community, which is extremely diverse racially, linguistically, geographically. The Baloch of mountains dress differently to the Baloch of the desert, who again dress differently to the Baloch of the Indus River, and who again, dress differently to the Baloch that are probably part of the Hingol National Park, the one of the major forests. It is also important to, I guess, note at this point that Balochistan does make 43% of Pakistan, geographically speaking. It is Pakistan's largest province and yet the poorest province, economically speaking. And we do have some very serious environmental and social justice issues that are operating within this diaspora. So let me just leave that there.
Rida, that's really interesting. It's the only province of Pakistan that I haven't visited. I've been to the rest of them, all the way from Gilgit and Skardu, all the way down to Karachi and Sindh, but not Balochistan. And yet it makes up 43% of the landmass. I mean, that's incredible. Why do you think that Balochistan has been such a bone of contention between India and Pakistan?
It's really interesting, Sarina, because I feel like it's always the indigenous people of Pakistan, no matter if they are Kashmiris or Waziristanis or Pakhtuns or Baloch. I feel like it's always the indigenous community that gets caught in this crossfire that they did not ignite, really. And at this point, that's one of the incidents that we keep that keeps getting highlighted in the media is the Jafar Express incident, which is basically a train in Balochistan during the month of Ramadan. Passengers were traveling. The train contained mixed passengers. And this is another thing that I would like to sort of share with the audience, that just because someone is Baloch doesn't mean they only live in Balochistan. It doesn't work like that. Not all Punjabis of Pakistan live in Punjab, and not all Kashmiris in Pakistan live in Kashmir. People migrate for economical opportunities, for work, for travel, for marriage. And therefore, obviously, if there is a train that's commuting from Balochistan to another city, you are going to have passengers that are from all kinds of backgrounds, whether it's, they're Pakhtuns or Hazaras or Saraiki or Baloch or Punjabi. The interesting thing with the Jafar Express incident, which was reported by Dawn and other media outlets in Pakistan, was the fact that that Baloch Liberation Army, which is apparently a separatist group, an insurgent group, stopped the train. They checked the IDs of the people, and if anyone's ID is written as has a address of the Punjab province of Pakistan, they were sort of separated from the rest of the group, and they were basically shot and killed on the spot. While and obviously this is like a severe form of ethnic violence where someone has been sort of segregating the people that are Baloch versus non-Baloch, or Baloch versus like Punjabis. But interestingly enough, like the Pahalgam attack that happened in Kashmir is sort of running from a similar narrative. So there were tourists, and then suddenly the Hindus were asked to be separated from the rest of the people, whether they are Sikhs or Muslims. And so those tourists that were separated from the rest of the gang in the Pahalgam attack, it's like the assassinator really only wanted to murder or unfortunately martyr somebody who's only from Hindu faith specifically. So very interesting parallels between the Jafar Express incident in March and then the Pahalgam incident in April. The fact that one was sort of the group was separated or segregated based on ethnicity, like the Punjabi ethnicity with the Jafar Express incident, whereas with the Pahalgam incident, they were segregated based on their religious identity.
Yeah, I noted the parallel as you were speaking. But in terms of like the recent media reports on Balochistan that have been coming out of, well, I suppose both. So I think I'd probably want to start with Pakistan's claim that India has had a hand in some of the terrorist attacks in Balochistan. And again, as you were describing that, I mean, the parallels are quite obvious, aren't they? They're striking. What do you think about that? Or perhaps not even yourself, but people on the ground in Balochistan, what are their perceptions of these attacks?
Well, if you are the largest province of Pakistan and yet you are the poorest province of Pakistan, there's due to be tensions between you and the existing government. And rightly so. Like, for example, something as simple as the fact that access to water, 85% of people in Balochistan do not have access to safe drinking water. And as we say sadly, that they drink the same water as animals. That's unfortunately how bad the poverty is, and that's how bad the healthcare access is. I think one of the commentators, one of the academics from Pakistani community, even said that, in 1952, gas was discovered in Balochistan. By 1954, all of Pakistan had access to it, but the Baloch people and the people of Balochistan did not have access to it until 1984. So there has been decades of unfair treatment towards in an ethnic community that is indigenous to that community for more than 10,000 years. And I think that when Baloch people, obviously, they simply just want to be treated equally as any other citizen. Whether as any other citizen of Pakistan, whether you be a resident of Punjab, or whether you be a resident of South Punjab or Saraikistan, whether you be the resident of Sindh or Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the Baloch people simply want to have equal opportunities and equal access as everybody else, except unfortunately, in many ways, one can argue that Pakistani government failed to provide that. For years, this community had been neglected for basic amenities, for basic human rights. And again, since an element of that community was always against the idea of joining Pakistan, that sort of gained popularity with time, because it's sort of like some of the comments from young Baloch people, they go to university in Pakistan, but they're under constant surveillance, or they're always afraid of being either forcibly disappeared, or they are afraid of like graduating with a degree but then not getting a job. And some of them, I think, even wonder, why is it that they have to leave their indigenous community of Balochistan and have to move to cities like Karachi or Lahore or Islamabad to work? A province that's rich in minerals, a province that Pakistan is planning to sign a China-Pakistan economic corridor with, a province that Pakistani government is thinking of using as part of the Reko-Dik deal. I guess the young people of Balochistan and the wider community of Balochistan wonders, well, okay, you're going to do all these economic development and you talk about all these projects, but really, we don't even have access to clean drinking water. We don't even have access to like the basic necessities of life. So, and like you said, you have been to all provinces of Pakistan except for Balochistan, because there's always some sort of a security issue since Balochistan borders next to Afghanistan and Iran.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the reason I haven't been. Yeah, absolutely. Rida, why do you think that there is the underdevelopment that you describe? I mean, of course, Balochistan, you're absolutely right. There's the Gwadar port that is still in development, that has been funded by China. There was a lot of optimism around that when that was first announced, and even when the construction of that began. There've even been social media influencers who've been visiting Gwadar and, highlighting how beautiful it is. It's on the Arabian Sea. The coastline, of course, is spectacular. But as you said, the reality for the people living there hasn't, it hasn't produced the benefits that they had hoped for. Why do you think that is? I mean, from your perspective, why do you think there is that level of underdevelopment? Is it just that Pakistan are in a difficult economic situation at the moment, or does it go beyond that?
I definitely feel, Sarina, it goes beyond that because it's one thing to sell a dream of an economical development of a community, but then it's at the same time disrespecting them constantly is not going to help the Pakistani government or even the foreign investors that want to invest in the province of Balochistan. I remember going to one of the events at the local Pakistani consulate a couple of years ago, and I dressed in my traditional Baloch clothes. And there's a lady, she was very highly educated, and she turns around and she's like, "Oh, are you here to perform? Are you here to perform a dance?" And my response was like, firstly, I was confused because I was like, why is she saying that to me, like that I'm about to perform some sort of a dance? And then it hit me that they think, and the many residents of Pakistan, the way they perceive Pakhtuns or Baloch is that our only contribution to society should be either in the form of an entertainment, like promoting like our art or culture, or it's sort of needs to be done in a comical sort of way to again entertain the audience. They don't really understand that in Baloch culture, you women don't really dance publicly. And it was really hard because it's like suddenly I had just experienced racism or ethnic discrimination for being a Baloch. So next time when the Pakistani consulate invited me, I wore a green colored shalwar kameez from Agha Noor, right? So because you don't want to be perceived as an entertainer, you don't want to be perceived as someone who is only there to sort of there to just sort of promote art and whatnot. But it's this kind of disrespect that kind of keeps appearing. Even something as simple as wishing Sindhi community Sindhi Ikta Day, but not wishing Baloch community Baloch cultural day, which is in March, or and this is at a subtle level. It goes deeper when you are constantly feeling as a Baloch that your culture is made fun of by Pakistan television, particularly the Pakistani dramas, the kind of the way you are only called upon morning shows in Pakistan just for like to sing and dance, but your actual cultural identity is not really respected, but more treated like, again, more like an entertainment. And I think it creates a deep sense of anger within Baloch community that, we are an indigenous tribe that's 10,000 years old, and yet people perceive us as somehow, as if we are somehow barbaric, or as if somehow our community is, mistreats women to the point that, we are just some sort of backward human beings. And and it's and in some ways, yeah, we are backward, but also because of lack of economical opportunities in Balochistan. But on the other hand, it's not like the mindset of the community is not necessarily that regressive. Otherwise, why would so many Baloch people support someone like Maharang Baloch, who is a doctor, a woman, leading protests across Balochistan? Why would a Baloch community support a woman if they were so entrenched in patriarchy and if they were so regressive about women's rights and gender rights?
Rida, do you feel comfortable talking a little bit about her and the sort of current situation surrounding her?
Absolutely, and I also want to point out at this point that when I earlier pointed out the linguistic diversity within Baloch community, that Sindhi speaking Baloch, Saraiki speaking Baloch, Shiddi Baloch, Paravi Baloch, Marang comes from Balochi speaking community, which means they speak the indigenous language of the Baloch community. And often when we have people like her and many other young people within the Baloch community from that diaspora, they report of being victims of enforced disappearances, which they do say is done by the state of Pakistan at that point. However, I do think that these enforced disappearances, and everybody sort of who studies the Balochistan academically can tell that they have been happening for years. This isn't something that happened in like 2024. The enforced disappearances have been happening across Pakistan to different communities, say in Waziristan, in KPK, even in Gilgit-Baltistan, even in Sindh, even in Kashmir, even in like the enforced disappearances, despite being an international crime, has been happening in all parts of Pakistan and wider South Asia, including India and many parts of India. It has been happening for many, many decades. Now, someone like Maharang Baloch, unfortunately, her father has been a victim of it. I believe that her brother has been a victim of it as well. Obviously, countless international organizations, such as Amnesty International, especially Amnesty International South Asia, condemn enforced disappearances for everybody. And they certainly did make a press release when Maharang Baloch was arrested by the state and is still in custody of the state of Pakistan. But at the same time, there has been a crackdown of her organization or the organization that she was leading, which is the Baloch Yakjahati Committee. And there has been a crackdown on that group of Baloch young people as well. But I guess my question is that you have young people from Baloch community who are victims of enforced disappearances and victim of this intergenerational trauma of being deprived of their basic human rights. And yet at the same time, no one has tried to dialogue with them. She came all the way to Islamabad, with marching with all these women and children, and the state did not dialogue with her. And then they had been doing these peaceful protests in other parts of Balochistan. And there has been times where they have been fired with gunshots, and they don't understand why the state would not communicate to them. Although some people have complained that they have been blocking traffic, and therefore, they should not be allowed to protest. Either way, it doesn't matter how you look at it. The Baloch Jati Committee is certainly documenting everyday enforced disappearances of different members of Baloch community within Balochistan. Sometimes they're not even Baloch who are victims of enforced disappearances. It's like could be somebody from another ethnic tribe living in Balochistan who's also victim of that enforced disappearance. And it's sad because now when you look at some of their recent profiles, we've had a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old Chakar Baloch, 14 years old, 12 years old. Like it's scary because they are children. By every definition of the law, these are children. They are not even at times adults that you can say, oh yeah, this is a full-fledged terrorist that kind of was trained and knows what he was doing. A lot of them, especially in the recent times, they're very young, under the age of 18, under the age of 21, under the age of 25. So it is scary seeing that. And I do draw a parallel of Baloch enforced disappearances with that of Kashmir enforced disappearances and with that of Waziristan's enforced disappearances. It's like, again, goes back to that idea that maybe the indigenous people of Pakistan are always disposable, or their lives are disposable, unfortunately.
I can see that I can understand certainly from what you've described in my own understanding of the issue, having spent time in Pakistan. As you know, I've worked in Pakistan extensively and engaged with academics there, including Baloch academics. But my understanding is that the vast majority of people in Balochistan don't support separatist movement. What they're asking for is better provisions for an acknowledgement of human rights, but that doesn't make them anti-Pakistani or pro and Azad Balochistan. But we've seen, haven't we, in the media, as you rightly pointed out and commented on yourself within your social media, that there is this narrative that has emerged since the war that Balochistan has declared itself independent. And as you rightly said, that's completely unfounded. But do you want to say something about that? Because I know your take when we spoke about this separately was really interesting.
Oh, absolutely, Sarina. It's like one of those things, you sort of wake up in the morning after this war hysteria between India and Pakistan for 4 days, and there is ceasefire, and there's, talk of peace, and all these, Trump has stepped in, and all these politicians and highly influential people have stepped in, and then suddenly the whole direction of Indian media is about, congratulations, Balochistan, you're now free. And and it's done by certain Indian anchors that, again, not very long ago were, kind of instigating a war. And they're like, oh, what do you mean there is a ceasefire between Pakistan and India? There should be a war. And it's people that are sitting in Maharashtra, people that are sitting in Uttar Pradesh, people that are sitting in uh, far away from the line of control in Kashmir, far away from anywhere in Punjab, far away from any part of Balochistan. And it's amazing the fact that there is this obsession of India with Balochistan. And I mean, it's not the first time we've noticed it. I mean, Bollywood has made certain movies about Baloch community and portrayed Balochistan a certain way, which in some ways I'm grateful to Pakistan for promoting Balochistan's tourism and debunking some of those myths, as that Balochistan isn't exactly that underdeveloped as they have described it to be in their movies. But on the other hand, it is quite ridiculous when you breach the Indus Water Treaty and affect a massive Baloch community that is coming from our part of Pakistan or our part of Baloch roots, which is the Saraiki Baloch community. And just for the sake of explaining this to the audience, that the Saraiki Baloch people are located in the four primary towns or cities known as Rahim Yar Khan, Dera Ghazi Khan, Dera Ismail Khan, and Daria Khan. These four towns are named after the four different chiefs of the Baloch tribe for like many hundred years ago. And these communities are, again, indigenous to the Indus River. They share their land. They come under the province of Punjab, but really it's the province of Saraikistan, and they share their border with both Balochistan and the South Punjab community or the Punjab community. And they are a community of farmers. In the last few years, they have been working very hard to preserve the Bulhan, which is the dolphin of the Indus River. A lot of people don't know about this, that there were only 900 dolphins remaining in the Indus River, and this community worked so hard. And they call themselves the Cholistanis, whether they be from Saraikistan, Sindh, or again the part of Balochistan that I just described. They've been working so hard to preserve these dolphins that today there's more than 2,000, and they obviously hope that they can continue to preserve them. But it's very hard when you breach the Indus Water Treaty, because the first casualty of that treaty is not a human, but the wildlife and the habitat that will be negatively affected around the Indus River. And this community had also been protesting against the building of canals from the Indus River to stop the Pakistani government and to stop the state government or the provincial government from doing that. So they were highly involved, and they were highly sort of active around preserving the environment and the rights of the farmers. And then suddenly, India, instead of acknowledging that, yeah, the Indus Water Treaty is actually going to be hurting several communities in Pakistan, particularly our community as well, They distracted the whole narrative and rebuilt it, like they rebuilt this new narrative. Oh, Balochistan is now Azad. And people are so confused. And again, it's hard because, you know, Baloch people, we might be in few millions, and Indians are in billions. And so how do you again, yeah, educate a community that is so far away geographically located from Balochistan, that falls for the propaganda of their own media? They don't read books about Balochistan. They don't speak the Balochi language. And one of the scariest things that I have always found about the Indian narrative, is especially the narrative of Akhand Bharat, that claims that the real India or the real Bharat is from Indonesia all the way to Syria. So, which means it encompasses all of Afghanistan, all of Pakistan, all of Iran, I mean, and several other countries. I mean, this is quite. I mean, I don't know if it's I could call it a dream, but it's definitely a nightmare for many if that happens to become true. So I do feel like in many ways Baloch community is both victim of Muslim fanaticism, especially with the rise of Taliban and oppressive Taliban of Afghanistan, and sharing border with them. But on the other hand, they're also victims of Hindu fascism and this ridiculous idea of Akhand Bharat. Yes, it's true that we have Hindu temples in Balochistan and that we have Hindus living in Balochistan for a few hundred years. But that's like saying, you know, I as a Muslim come to Australia and build a mosque, and then suddenly I start telling the whole world that Australia was part of some Islamic caliphate. It doesn't work like that. Just because there are some practitioners of a particular religion that exist in a particular community, that doesn't mean that whole community is part of this Hindu fascist regime, or that they had anything to do with that part of the world, even during the time of empires and whatnot. I think at one point we do point out the invasion, the first one of the invasions of Balochistan that took place under Chandragupta Maurya, whose grandson was Ashoka, and Ashoka did attempt to colonize Balochistan, however, was eventually defeated. We do talk about multiple invaders that have come to Balochistan, but the indigenous people of Balochistan have always resisted. But I do feel like people don't read books, and people certainly don't read history books and academic journal articles, and therefore the pressure to educate is remarkably very stressful.
And just to say that, to confirm for anybody watching this, where do you think this narrative that was created after the war about Balochistan, where did that come from? About it being Azad Balochistan? I mean, where do you think that started?
Probably started by John Abraham and Imran Hashmi, some of the Bollywood actors. I'm honestly quite confused by this narrative. And then I think at some point Indian media was even interviewing someone called Mir Yar Baloch, and even the word, like the name Mir Yar, that it's such a, like, half the people in Baloch community, especially my Saraiki Baloch community, are called Yar Khan or Yar Muhammad or Yar something. And then again, if you go to Sindh and you speak to Sindhi Baloch community, many of them, they start their name with the word Mir. I am Mir this, Mir that. So even that name that they have come up with, Mir Yar Khan, like, it seems very like, it's like they have used someone's some random popular syllables and created this fictitious character. And it's I just don't understand it. I honestly, like I said, I understand there has been an element in Baloch community since 1947 that are part of the insurgency and separatism, but that is definitely not the majority of Baloch people. And it's even more confusing because by now, since 1947 up until 2025, many Baloch people in Pakistan have intermarried with other communities. So, like, say somebody like me, my mother is Punjabi, my father is Baloch, and, you know, we are proud Pakistanis. So the fact that you're carrying a narrative that is such a 1940s narrative, and you're highlighting it in 2025 in the context where there has been a school bus in Khuzdar, Balochistan, where as per the claims of ISPR, where an Indian missile struck the school bus, killing the innocent schoolgirls in the Baloch community in Khuzdar. So I don't understand. Like, okay, so Balochistan is Azad, but it is still being bombed by a foreign entity. Balochistan is so Azad, and yet people don't have access to clean drinking water. Balochistan is Azad, and yet Maharang Baloch is still in the custody of the Pakistani state. And there's still crackdown happening in with Baloch Yakjahti Committee, and Balochistan is Azad, and yet the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor deal is going ahead. There's just so many contradictions.
I mean, Rida, it sounds to me like when I was thinking about this, the war was fought with missiles and drones in Jammu and Kashmir on both sides, and it feels like it's being fought with words when it comes to Balochistan, which is still just as dangerous because, as you've said rightly, those words can incite violence, confusion, add to existing frustrations. I mean, do you feel that this is just a pawn now in this sort of war, post-war period between India and Pakistan? Do you think it will pass? Or do you think this is something that we're going to see an increased amount of attention on?
Um, it doesn't matter whether it goes to like, say, it trends on social media as Balochistan being Azad and Indian media being obsessed with it, which they are for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and or the fact that they are, say, India is not obsessed with Balochistan and they just basically abandon it. Either way, it doesn't work out well for Baloch community at the end of the day. Already there has been censorship of reporting from Balochistan within Pakistani media space. But on the other hand, I'm also very, I guess, as a Baloch, I often get a little bit disappointed with the narratives that come forward about Baloch community, and it's really good that some Baloch musicians, especially some young artists of Baloch community, have taken that narrative in their own control and are working very hard to sort of highlight their own stories through Balochi music, reviving Balochi music, or making even movies like Doda, which was about a boxer from Balochistan, or talking about the like, I think we had this young kid from Leari. We had a Pakistani rapper. She was from Leari, and she's completely niqab and everything, but she's rapping, and she shot her music video with Ali Sethi. Then we have people like Kuratullah and Baluch. Again, you can watch her songs on Coke Studio Indians if you're listening, and so I think in many ways Baloch people have time and time again try to reorient the narrative about preserving their culture, preserving their language, preserving their art form, preserving their indigeneity. And yet, unfortunately, time and time again, the media space about Baloch people has always been only political. It's been, like you said, like they are being used as a pawn by different politicians across the now I would say even across the border. So not just by the politicians in Pakistan, but also by politicians in India. They really have no education on the subject of Baloch culture and anthropology itself. Um, and one of the predictions, as we have, I think, by a Swedish linguist, Karina, I can't remember her last name, but she says that in the next 50 years, Balochi language will die out. So that is incredibly, it would be an incredible loss for a Baloch community to be losing their indigenous language that is 10,000 years old. And then again, when they actually do advocate for issues they care about, like the dolphins or the preservation or not building the canals around the Indus River, the fact that their voices are completely ignored, or that their contribution in that activism is ignored. Even the whole narrative around enforced disappearances, I think many people have said this, that um, enforced disappearance is just one issue of Balochistan, and it's not even specific to Balochistan. There are many, many issues that Baloch community is trying to navigate, starting from their survival to the preservation of their culture, and again, constantly trying to debunk myths around their culture and community. So it's sad that, this is the only thing Indian media ever wants to talk about, Baloch culture. And the worst was when they created the Netflix show Hiramanti, the Sanjay Leela Bansali, and they had this character Tajdar Baloch, who was coming to Lahore and trying to marry some Tawaif. Like, what the hell was that? So again, they are obsessed, and they really disrespect the Baloch culture in so many ways. Like, I don't know of any Baloch families who would be okay with having their sons and daughters marry sex workers. That doesn't make any sense. And again, the amount of disrespect the Indian media or the Pakistani media shows and highlights about Baloch community, it's ridiculous, really. Um, but at the same time, you're right. The war was being fought with words, and I would specify memes, to be honest, on both sides of the border. And that's why at the start of that India-Pakistan conflict, nobody was really taking the war seriously. Nobody really thought that there would be, drones sent and people are going to actually get attacked. People thought, this is just something that India Pakistan does every few years, the politicians do, and it was not going to get escalated.
Rida, just to conclude, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I just wanted to give you an opportunity just to give your own opinion on how you think that Baloch rights could be better advocated for, what that would look like, how Pakistan could support Balochistan. I know that's a huge question, but in terms of moving forward, I ask this because in the previous discussions I've done on Jammu and Kashmir, Azad Kashmir, and Indian administered Kashmir, this has come up as sort of like a closing thought, because of course people from those regions have their own opinions on how the issues should be resolved. So I wanted to just give you that opportunity before we ended our conversation.
Perfect, Serena. I think it's being solution focused is something that we all need to be in this day and age of fake news and misinformation and disinformation. I'm going to quote Rafiullah Kakar here, who is a very active academic in United Kingdom and very vocal about the issue of Balochistan, and has always written about that. And I'm going to say the same thing that he has been saying, that we need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Pakistan. We need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that highlights the trauma of Baloch community, the intergenerational trauma of Baloch community, and recognizes their multiple resistance towards multiple colonizers that came into that part of the world. Again, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is not limited to the stories of Baloch people. It's also going to be extended to the loss that Kashmiri people experienced in Pakistan because of the Kashmir conflict. It will extend to Waziristanis, it will extend to Gilgit-Baltistanis, it will extend to Sindhis, it will extend to people like us, the Saraiki people from Saraikistan, that have that Saraiki identity or the Saraiki Baloch identity, and yet have not been given a province or the status of a province as a community since 1947, since the creation of Pakistan. A Truth and Reconciliation Commission would open doors for dialogue between the existing young people or people involved in the Baloch Yakjahati Committee and people like Maharang Baloch and the state of Pakistan. A Truth and Reconciliation Commission will validate the trauma of that community, and then the conversation of healing can be started. And it's not like this has not been done. I mean, in cultures like Japan, we have a museum of what happened when the nuclear bomb was struck and how that impacted that community. We have museums in the world like the Holocaust Museum that acknowledges the suffering of a particular community. We have museums in the world, like even in Australia, for example, we have had leadership, particularly Prime Minister Cameron Rudd around 2008. We had a National Sorry Day where Australian ex-Prime Minister Cameron Rudd apologized to the Aboriginal community and the Torres Strait Islander community for the stolen generation that they underwent, which was absolutely horrific and broke apart Aboriginal families. So we need to do the same. There's no shame in saying sorry that, yeah, we have mistreated a community and we've mistreated them for decades, and we have kept them deprived to the point that their language is endangered. So the only way forward for Pakistani state is to create a Truth and Reconciliation Commission and not use military courts as a place to hang members of the Baloch community, because killing or doing military operations it does not resolve anything. You kill one Maharang, there will be 1,000 more that will wake up and get up, and they would oppose and resist. So create platforms where Baloch people can actually start their healing process. But to do that, you must acknowledge their trauma. So this is the way forward. And I think that if Pakistani government did that, it would very quickly be replicated in India and Nepal and Sri Lanka and other parts of the world, because without this sort of space, there is no way you can really preserve and reconcile with that indigenous community.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a really useful reflection.